I was certainly hoping I'd get a bonus for tonight, but somehow, I really doubted it. I wore my dark blue tuxedo for the first time in 3 years. I looked damn good, to say the least, but I really hated dressing up to this extent. After all, it was Friday night, and I was supposed to be sitting in my favorite lazy boy sipping a quality single malt. Instead, I was sitting at a table with colleagues and their spouses at a dinner dance fundraiser for the Blessings in a Backpack organization. This is one of the biggest social events of the year in our small Midwestern town, and just about everyone in the area attended. My boss bought a table for this event, and my wife and I got to attend. In fact, I specifically asked my wife to buy a new, sexy dress for the evening, and she did not disappoint, although she may have gone a little overboard with the sexy. "Oh shit, baby, I said sexy, not escort," I remarked as she came downstairs after her evening change of clothes. At 35, my wife was at the height of her beauty, I thought. Her thick red hair was styled in a high updo, and gold earrings dangled from her ears, accentuating her long neck. The low neckline of her burgundy silky dress showed off her lush breasts, and the hemline ending at mid-thigh emphasized all the time she spent at the gym on leg workout days. I expected her to buy a dress, but this dress was definitely a statement. Hey, look at me. I was certainly looking, and I knew all the other men were also enjoying the view. I never objected to other men looking at my wife as long as she remembered that I didn't share my toys. I often told her that myself. I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I would have preferred to be at home in an armchair, but Hester was exactly where she wanted to be, in the company of the cream of the city's society. As a high school teacher, she didn't get out much, but she was one of those natural social butterflies. Readable and witty, she drew people to her like ants to a picnic. We had time to chat a little and walk around the dance floor a couple times before I headed for the bar, and Hester returned to her table. A few feet from our seats, I saw that Hess was having an animated conversation with the man in my seat. It was United States Senator Thomas Norberto, who looked like a Latino Tom Selleck back in the days when Selleck was starring in Magnum P.I. He was incredibly handsome, single, and was 6'4", 220. More because of his looks than his intelligence, some were considering him for the next presidential race. I stood a few feet away from her for a couple of seconds, expecting my wife to at least acknowledge my presence, but it didn't happen. Moreover, I had never before seen my wife look like a lovesick teenager, practically making moon eyes at the senator during their conversation. Since none of them were going to acknowledge me, I did it myself. "Excuse me, Senator, but this is my seat," I said, taking my seat with 2 drinks in hand. He ignored me completely and continued his conversation with my wife, whose face brightened. I waited in silence for about 5 more seconds before I stopped being Mr. Polite. I passed my hand with a glass of wine between their 2 faces, breaking their enchantment, and placed her glass on the table in front of her. I remained standing between them, holding my glass, until the esteemed senator took the hint. "I have to go. I have to take my seat at the head table, but I'll be back later to continue the conversation," he told my wife, effectively ignoring me the whole time. "Stupid bastard," I grumbled to Hess, settling back down after he left. "I find him charming," she replied. "You, on the other hand, have been downright rude to a U.S. senator, for heaven's sake. You seem to forget that you are my wife, not his, and he sat in my seat and didn't move. That's incredibly rude and arrogant, even if he thinks he's going to be the next president." She did that superior eye movement that some women do very well. I hated it, and had said it to my wife repeatedly throughout our 9 years of marriage. I glared back at her, not wanting to get into an altercation in front of this crowd. She hummed but held her tongue as well. Dinner took about 90 minutes. Then the band started playing again and people went back to the dance floor. I knew Hess liked to dance, so I stood up and offered her my hand. She looked at my hand, looked me in the eye, and shook her head decisively. I strolled back to the bar and grabbed another drink, standing and making small talk with the other customers. I lost sight of Hess when she got up to socialize, but Senator Schmuck was easy to follow. The senator, with his security men by his side at all times, chatted with the guests and handed out gifts for half an hour before stepping out onto the open veranda. I wasn't born yesterday, so when Hess didn't show up at the table for another 10 minutes, I decided to look around the veranda. It appeared that the 2 of them were deep in conversation with an elderly couple, with the senator's arm resting comfortably around my wife's waist. I walked over to the couple and started to remove the senator's hand before someone grabbed me and twisted my arm between my shoulder blades, causing me to shriek in pain and turn my heads in our direction. "Nobody fucks with a United States Senator, buddy," a voice behind me growled as he started to nudge me toward the exit. "That's my wife," he put his hand on. I wheezed as I was sidestepped. He pushed me back into the main ballroom before letting me go. I told him to get his wife and bring her to me if he didn't want me to start making noise. "Damn it," he muttered to himself as he headed toward the senator. 2 minutes later, a red-faced Hess came through the door. She shrugged like she didn't know what was going on. I grabbed her arm and practically dragged her out of the ballroom. The ride home began in dead silence, but I knew it wouldn't last long. For some reason, Hess believed that the best defense was a good offense. "You bastard. You horribly embarrassed me in front of a United States Senator tonight," she screamed at me. Up until this point, I thought Hester and I had a pretty good marriage. Yes, we had our moments like any other couple, but I'd bet the lives of my 2 children that we'd go the distance. Not so much now. "You do realize you're my wife," I shot back at her. "No one, and I don't care if he's the goddamn president of the fucking United States, hugs you like he owns you. You know this is crossing all lines, but you did nothing to break free from that embrace. You were like a lovesick teenager with your high school crush." She blushed, stammered, but finally lowered her head and said nothing. I realized it hit the target. She was definitely in love with this man. If I thought Hess would apologize at some point, she let me know I thought otherwise. Not only did she not apologize, but she basically didn't speak to me for the next few days. Even the kids, even though they are only 7 and 5, sensed something was wrong and tried not to come into the room if we were both around. Dinner was the only time in the house to have a real conversation, as we both seemed to be trying to maintain communication through the kids. However, on Wednesday night, after the kids had gone to bed, Hess said we needed to talk. Not can we talk, we shouldn't talk, but we just need to talk. Nothing good ever comes out of those 4 words. To my disappointment, nothing good came out of those 4 words. My loving wife informed me that she and the distinguished senator were going out on Friday night. "It's not really a date. I'm going to accompany him to another one of those fundraising dinners," Hess said when I asked her a question about how unseemly it is for a married woman to go on a date with a man who is not her husband. "It sure looks like a date to me," I explained. "If you're accompanying him, I think it means you're his date. And since you're a married woman—" "You're a little person with a sick mind," she yelled back at me. "I would never cheat on you." "What do you call a married woman who goes on a date with a man who is not her husband? Even if you're not having sex, going on a date with another man is cheating," I stated. "Are you going to let me accompany your hot girlfriend Angie to dinner and dancing?" She twisted her mouth, made a grimace, and squinted at me. I knew that mentioning her sexiest friend would get her attention. She had a certain problem when it came to Angie, who, as the Rolling Stones put it, could make a dead man come. "That's different, and you know it. This would be a date. It's an escort for a United States Senator," she said. "Oh, right. Of course. Huge difference. Look, Hess, you can't date another man however you phrase it. We're married. We made vows. Remember that leaving everyone else behind crap?" said I. "You don't own me, Reggie, even if we do get married," she muttered. "If I really want to do something, I can and will. You don't own me." Movable property. That's what you get when you marry a crossword puzzler. "You are certainly not my property, but you are the mother of my children, and I would hate for you to destroy our family," I said. Her eyes got as big as saucers. Obviously, I'd gotten her attention. "You wouldn't be so stupid," she grinned. "It's just—" "No, baby, this is a turning point in our marriage." She grimaced again, but didn't answer. I hadn't expected this turn of events. When Hester came downstairs dressed for her date on Friday night, my eyeballs nearly popped out of my head. She was wearing a strapless white lace dress that skimmed her lush body and exposed the top half of her large breasts. I'd never seen the dress before and figured she'd bought it especially for the occasion. "Bastard," I whispered in horror. She took my epithet as a compliment and did a slow spin. At that moment, our children ran into the room, saw Hess, and froze in place. "Wow, Mommy, you're beautiful," exclaimed our 7-year-old Eliza. "Why are you dressed up like a princess?" Hess shifted his gaze from our daughter to me, apparently expecting me to back her up. But I didn't. I just stared at my wife. "Ia, I can't tell her," said Hester. "You can't because you know it's wrong," I growled. Explain to your daughter how you're leaving the three of us and your family to go on a date with a U.S. senator. Mommy needs to get away for a little while for a fancy party, Hess began. Be a good girl for Daddy, and I'll see you tomorrow when you wake up. Why isn't Daddy coming with you? 5-year-old Nate asked. Hess hesitated, trying to think of a good lie. It didn't take me long to come up with the truth. Because Mommy doesn't love me enough, I replied. Both children looked at Hess with a shocked and hurt expression on their faces. She looked at me with the same expression. The truth hurts, doesn't it? I asked. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The four of us froze in place until the bell rang again. Moment of truth, baby. Him or us, I said. She opened the door on the third ring. I noticed one of the senator's guards at the door and saw a black limousine in the driveway. Remember, be on your best behavior for Daddy. I'll see you tomorrow morning. With those words, she left. I think it was him. For a minute, I was in shock, and then I realized that I still had children who needed attention. I would have loved to drown my sorrow in the liquor cabinet, but I didn't. All that had to happen was a few FaceTime calls, one each to my parents and hers. After all, kids love to FaceTime chat with grandparents. I started with Hester's parents. We've always had a great relationship, and I knew Hess' little adventure wouldn't go to waste for them. We were laughing and joking with them for about a minute when Hess' mom realized her daughter wasn't on the call. Where's my daughter Reggie? Did you put her in a suitcase somewhere? My mother-in-law joked. No, Mom. Hess is out on a date with Senator Thomas Norberto. I think she'll be back tomorrow, I said quietly. What? My mother-in-law squealed. A date? Are you sure, Reg? She called it escorting a good-looking senator to a fundraiser. I call it a date. Maybe even more than that, I spat out. And she won't be back until tomorrow? Exclaimed my incredulous father-in-law. And you just let her go? I tried to talk some sense into her, Dad, but she said I didn't own her, I replied. I told her she was abandoning her family if she acted like that, but she seemed to think it was a forgivable offense. The kids hijacked the conversation for the next 5 minutes, for which I was grateful. Then my mother-in-law told the children to go to their rooms for a few minutes and brought the conversation back to my wife. Don't do anything reckless or stupid, she advised. Talk to her, Reg. Don't just throw her away. Think of the children. What did she do on her way out the door, Mom? My mother-in-law could only cough a little on the line. My mom, on the other hand, was not so gracious when I called my parents and told them what had happened. I know the name of a good lawyer, honey, she offered immediately. She was on Elaine's lawyer in her divorce from Uncle Will. She ate Will's lawyer's lunch. Yeah, that was good to know. After the calls, I ordered a pizza. The kids and I watched a Disney movie that they had picked out themselves. I had no idea what it was. I didn't even try to sleep after I put the kids to bed. I tried not to think about the fact that my wife was probably fucking Senator Dickhead and watched the same stories on ESPN all night until the kids woke up. Then I made a big breakfast of pancakes and bacon. Everyone knows that pancakes and bacon make the world go right, even if Mom isn't home when the kids wake up. She'll be home soon, I lied when they asked when their mom would be back. I guess when you've already spent the whole night with another man, there's no reason to cut the date short. A black limousine pulled up to our driveway at almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Both kids were playing in the yard, and several neighbors were also in their yards when the car pulled up. Under normal circumstances, the children would have run up to their mother and thrown themselves into her arms after being gone all day, but this time they both froze in place. Hess looked disappointed that she wasn't greeted before she headed toward the house. Of course, she was wearing the same dress she'd left the house in the previous evening, but this time it looked wrinkled and sloppy. Her hair was loose around her shoulders and her makeup was barely applied. She looked exactly like what she was, a used whore. I moved away from the window and sat in a chair in the living room before she came to the front door. I didn't get up to greet her when she came in, looking very tired. Hi, she said. Looks like you and the kids survived the night without me. Looks like you barely survived, I said reproachfully. She blushed and staggered toward the stairs. Don't start with me, Reg. Let me take a nap in a shower, she wheezed. I raised my hands in surrender. To hell with it. At least it was obvious to me that it was over between us. All I had to do was figure out how to make life as easy as possible for my kids. I really didn't want to be a weekend dad. I wondered if I would be able to hold my own and stay in the house until the kids were out of school. Hester finally came downstairs around 7 o'clock at night. I had already fed all of us. I told her there was leftovers in the refrigerator. She smiled weakly. The kids sensed something was wrong and kept their distance from Hess. That's great, Reggie. Did you spend the last day telling them how mean their mom is? She asked quietly when we were alone. Although it would have been easy, I didn't tell them anything, Hess. Children are far more perceptive than many give them credit for. They saw you leave us last night and saw your triumphant return this afternoon, as did many of the neighbors. Great move, by the way, I said. I believe that last night and this morning were worth it to alienate your children and damage our family. Guilt flashed in her eyes, which quickly turned to defiance. I didn't destroy our family, she replied. That will depend on you. If you become a real man and get over your petty ego, we can mend the relationship and keep the family together. If you want to be vindictive, however, I suppose we can go our separate ways and you can become Mr. Incomplete. I didn't expect the conversation to go in that direction. I expected guilt and remorse, not defiance and anger. 1 o'clock, right? I snapped back. Wasn't the night enough for you to stay another half day? Just a date, right? She hissed but remained silent, dropping her eyes to the floor. We can get through this, Reg, and be ourselves again. I know I hurt you. I'm sorry for that, but it was something I had to do for me, and I don't regret it. It was a wonderful night and morning. He's a really great guy and a gentleman besides. God, I hope that wasn't an apology, because if it was, you really need to work on that, I stated. I'm only apologizing for hurting you, not for anything else. It was a wonderful experience, Hess said with genuine conviction in her voice. I'd beat Hess to death if my eyes were lasers. It was hardly a great experience for me, I said, trying to match her level of conviction. You broke the oath you made to me, and eventually our family, and you did it pretty easily, I said. Hess was shocked when I walked into our guest bedroom before bedtime. What are you doing? She asked. We can't handle it if you don't want to try. No, I was trying to convince you not to cheat on me before it happened. Now it's too late, I explained. She looked at me like I was a cranky child. We can't turn back time, Reggie. We have to move forward, she declared. You're right, babe. We can't turn back time. But we wouldn't have to worry about all this if you had done the right thing and not gone to Senator Dickhead, I said. That's on your conscience. You made the decision. Remember, you told me I didn't own you. You made your own decision like a big girl. It's not my fault it was the wrong decision for our family. But, she muttered as I gently pushed her out of the room and closed the door behind her. I slept like a rock. I'm sure being awake for 48 hours straight and the stress of the situation contributed to my sleep. It has become a family tradition for me to make an awesome breakfast on Sunday mornings. This Sunday, I made Belgian waffles using my tricked-out waffle maker. The kids and I were just eating when Hester finally came out of the bedroom looking like she had slept in the blender, if she slept at all. Mom, Dad made us a solid breakfast both days of the weekend, Eliza exclaimed. Maybe you should go out more often on Friday nights. Hess looked at the three of us, burst into tears, and ran off into the bedroom. The children looked shocked. Did I say something wrong? Eliza asked with the sincere innocence of a 7-year-old. No, baby. I think Mommy's just upset that she missed the waffles, I said softly. Later, I was sitting in my lazy boy chair watching the Chicago Cubs beat the St. Louis Cardinals, when I heard the bedroom door swing open with such force that the doorknob crashed into the wall behind it. Not 5 seconds later, an agitated Hester was standing in front of me, shouting unintelligible words and gesticulating wildly. Grr, brr, how could you? Sant, slut. Or something like that came out of her mouth along with a few strands of saliva. It was disgusting. Slow down, baby. I don't understand a word you're saying and you keep drooling and sputtering, I said. Arr. She screamed as tears joined the mix of things on her face and blouse. How could you tell my parents about my date? They now think I'm the biggest slut compared to the Kardashians. What's Kardashian, Mommy? Asked Elise as she and Nate ran into the room upon hearing the commotion. I raised my eyebrows at my wife and stared into her wild eyes. She tried very hard to pull herself together before telling the kids to go play in their bedrooms. She stood in front of my chair while the kids left. Start talking, mister, she hissed as she heard their bedroom door close. I saw no need to hide something like that from your parents, after all. You were just accompanying a United States senator to a fundraiser, as you so eloquently put it, I said. It's not my fault that their assessment of the situation matched mine. By the way, my parents thought about the same thing, and you should duck the next time my mom comes near you. No, 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 it was just, began Hess, but quickly stopped. A wonderful experience? I quickly finished for her. If looks could kill, I'd just be a grease spot on my chair. But at that moment, I didn't care. I looked at her and gestured for her to move a few inches so I could see the TV. Grrr, she growled before running out of the room. For the next 2 weeks, I continued to sleep in the guest room. When the kids took notice, I told them I had a cold and didn't want their mom to get sick. I was sure Eliza knew I was lying, but she was smart enough to keep her thoughts to herself. A damn smart 7-year-old. I didn't say anything and just showed up in our marital bed one night. I climbed in about an hour after Hess had gone upstairs and spooned up against her like I always did when I was facing her. She moaned in her sleep when I first pulled up next to her, then snuggled back against me an inch or so later. When the alarm clock rang the next morning, she was lying snuggled up against me. That feels good, she murmured. It's long overdue for you to come to your senses. She reached for me, but I gently placed my hand on her forearm, pulling her hand back. I turned so that we were face to face in bed. Some things are best done when you can look a person straight in the eye. You'll have to take the test and show me the results before I'll get close to you again, Hess, I said softly. You can trust Senator Dickhead, but I don't want to take any chances. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked like she wanted to say something, but decided to refrain. Instead, she just nodded, which told me more than words could say. She and the senator didn't use protection. The situation was getting more and more complicated. I planned to stay until the kids graduated high school, which meant another 14 years before Nate left for college. I could do that because I love them, but I wasn't going to go 14 years without intimacy, especially with a beautiful woman living under the same roof as him. I knew that didn't characterize my character very well, but at this point, I didn't care. The love I had for this woman had taken a huge hit 2 weeks ago and continued to fade with each passing day. I watched her get out of bed with the saddest expression on her face. Not long ago, that look would have practically destroyed me, and I would have done almost anything to make whatever was making her sad disappear. Now the pain in my heart kept me from reaching out to her. Who has this woman become? The woman I married 9 years ago and had been with for the past 11 years knew without a doubt that I would never accept a date with another man, never even consider her having sex with anyone else. Hester and I met in our senior year of college. 3 months later, we started dating, and 2 more years later, we were married. She worked as an actuary for a national insurance company, one of those faceless people who sit in a cubicle and calculate insurance rates. I always found her to be analytical and honest, although she lacked a bit of spontaneity and humor. Those 2 qualities were my part of the equation, as well as the fact that I'm a bit disorganized and fun-loving. I thought we were a good match, each of us complementing the other, and someday we would celebrate 50 years of marriage. I didn't realize that Senator Tomas Norberto would burst into our lives. About 10 days after I returned to our bed, Hester handed me an envelope when I walked in the door after work. It contained her health certificate. "I hope you're happy, asshole," she whispered harshly to me. "You have no idea how embarrassed I was. I may never be able to look Dr. Sanjay in the eye again." "Not on me, baby," I said into the void. "Keep your legs interlocked with people who aren't your husband, and you won't have to be embarrassed." She gasped, but couldn't answer anything. She started to move on, but I wasn't done yet. "How many times has Senator Dickhead contacted you after a date?" I asked. "We haven't talked," she began before I held out my hand, and she fell silent. She knew what I wanted. She grimaced, then reached into her pocket and handed me her phone. I quickly looked up his number and found several texts and 2 phone calls. It didn't look like they'd gotten back together, though not without his involvement. The messages didn't suggest that Hess was encouraging him, but she wasn't preventing it either. "Son of a bitch," shouted I. "We're on thin ice, Hess. If I find out you 2 are dating again, our kids will practically be orphans because I'll end up in jail after I kill you both. Understand?" I held out my phone to her. She took it glumly and slipped it back into her pocket, then headed for the kitchen. I knew nothing would happen that night, but the next night in bed, Hess was all over me. I smiled, but said nothing in response. I was well aware that Hess was trying to win my affection back. She was very good at it. Now Senator Dickhead was on the small list of those who knew about it. Considering Hess had come home with a bang a few weeks ago, I was curious to see what the neighbors were gossiping about. No one addressed me directly, but I could see the pitying looks of the other guys and the barely concealed smirks of some of the women. I didn't have to wonder for long, though, because one evening, as I sat on the back porch thinking and Hess watched TV in the family room, Elise came up to me. "Daddy, what is a slut club and how did Mom become a member?" she asked quietly. Damn. My ego wasn't hurt as much as the fact that the blow came to my children. I know I should have closed my wide-open mouth before responding. "Where did you hear that conversation, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to speak offhandedly so as not to scare her off. "The girls said their moms talked and laughed about Mom being a member of the slut club, and it doesn't seem like a good thing. Daddy, is everyone in our family a member of this club? I'd like to think I'm a pretty good poker player. I had to do my best to keep a poker face when I stood in front of my daughter. Mommy made a mistake recently, Elle. It's a mommy-daddy mistake. You have nothing to worry about. The other mommies shouldn't be talking about it, and they shouldn't be talking about this club. I want you to leave when the other girls start talking about this club. This is our problem, baby, not yours. I'm sorry the other girls were mean to you." I hugged her gently. I hoped she couldn't see the tears in my eyes. It would be a memory I would cherish until my last day on Earth. Slowly, very slowly, life in our house normalized, at least in my opinion. But it was a new normal, because whether Hess accepted it or not, we would never again be the same as we had been before her date. I would never again be able to fully trust her, nor would I be able to forgive and forget the incredible disrespect she'd shown me. And our family. Love. Well, to quote Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it? 6 months later, Hester finally realized what was wrong, or at least had the courage to say something. We had just finished an intense session of intimacy initiated by her, as always since that date and as usual. I rolled over onto my side to fall asleep. Before she spoke, I heard her sniffling. Reggie, can we talk?" she asked timidly. "Yeah," I sighed. "Can you turn around?" she asked with a note of irritation in her voice. I sighed, trying to sound as annoyed as she was. Then I turned to face her and looked her straight in the eye. She held my gaze. "You realize we haven't made love since." "Say it, Hess. Say it," I demanded. "You had the courage to do it. Have the courage to admit it." "We haven't made love since my date, I noticed. You shake the shit out of me, lay back and go to sleep. You make sure I get mine, but it's only physical. Hell, you haven't snuggled up to me since. I miss that. Intimacy." "You can't even say the words, babe," I said with a hint of sarcasm. "Your date. Ha! You had intimacy with him. Admit it. I'm not an idiot. You go out on a date with another man and don't come back until the middle of the next day. You think I don't know what happened?" "You make it sound so cheap and tasteless," she said, her voice frustrated. "Yes, we were intimate Saturday night, and that was fine, but we made love Sunday morning, and he was gentle and soft, very much like you, actually. It was an experience I'll never forget. And that's why we don't make love anymore, Hess," exclaimed I. "Don't you see? You gave him what you promised belonged only to me, and you enjoyed it all. It was unforgettable, you just said." "Come on, Reg. It was just one night, 2 days. Out of the 1,000 days we'll be married. Mathematically, it's nothing. We can get over it, Reg, if you really want to try," she said. "Thanks for the math lesson, Hess, but I never looked at our marriage as a quiz on percentages. Would you be so upset if I slept with Mary Jo Young?" Mary Jo Young was a lush-breasted blonde who lived on the next block over. Almost all the other women on our street watched her like hawks whenever she struck up any kind of conversation with their husbands. "Wait, you want to have sex with Mary Jo?" "No, that's not going to happen. You can't do that," she wailed. "Are you listening to yourself, Hess? I didn't say I wanted to have sex with Mary Jo. You said you did. I asked you if you would be so lenient if I had sex with her," I said. She looked confused until her brain caught up with her ears. Then she became angry. "I see your answer. You don't need to speak," I said smugly. She stopped looking directly at me. "Do you know that a few months ago the other little girls in the neighborhood were picking on Elise because their mothers called you a slut?" "Yes. It was a fun discussion." "No," I said. When I said the last word, her face turned from anger to shock. "Eliza never came to see me before." "Oh," she exclaimed, thinking. "I'm so sorry." "Not sorry enough, babe. You described the date as unforgettable. At least you were accurate. It was unforgettable. For me and for you. I'll never be able to forget your betrayal. Never," I said. With those words, I turned my back to her and fell asleep. I have no idea if she got anything. I have to hand it to Hester. She really tried to be the perfect mom for the next few months. I was usually the caregiver when it came to the kids' activities, but suddenly Hess was driving the kids to sports and music events and being a supportive parent cheerleader. I wondered if she realized that the best way to keep our family together was to focus on us and not her own selfish desires. Now that's a concept. The kids seemed to really enjoy the extra attention to them, but my daughter showed me again how exceptional she is in her observational skills. She was wiser than her 8 years. "Mommy's trying really hard, Daddy," she told me once. I hope she apologized well for all the things she did wrong. I tried to smile genuinely, knowing how observant she was. To the outside world, everything was fine in the Wilkerson house. I tried very hard to keep up appearances. For my part, I think Hester would have walked through fire to not only keep up appearances, but to return to my favor. We were two people living in the same house of privilege, though I know she desperately wanted to return to full normalcy. For some reason, she was sure I would give in to her. Somewhere in there were still remnants of my love for her. I just couldn't turn off the 9 years during which she had been the most important thing in my life. She also made it difficult for herself by keeping in touch with Senator Dickhead. Since I had taken her phone away from her shortly after the date and looked through her calls and text messages, she had tried not to delete them, but she had no idea how easy it was to clone someone's phone to access all the messages. He seemed to be in constant contact with her, and she was trying to keep him at a distance, at least for now. "Maybe we can have another date sometime in the near future. It'll be in town," he wrote a partial month ago. "Husband is still acting like an asshole because of the last time. I dare not risk it," she wrote back to him. Needless to say, I was not impressed. A month later, we celebrated our 10th anniversary with a family outing to Chuck E. Cheese. The kids had a great time, but Hester not so much. She waited for the kids to play before she expressed her disappointment to me. "We always celebrated anniversaries as a couple by having a special night out. You changed the rules. Because you're still being a vindictive bastard. When did you have time to become such a petty person?" she commented. Again, the answer to this question is the same as to many other the day of your date. You did it. With me. With us. And to you, I said. "Can't you just let it go?" she pleaded. "How often do you two text each other?" I asked. She had the nerve to smirk. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and held it out to me. I tossed it high into the air and caught it as it came down. "I know you're a whore, but I also know you're not stupid. I'm willing to bet money that there is not a trace of correspondence between you on this phone since I first picked it up. But there are transcripts of texts and phone calls that were on that phone. I know you weren't the initiator, but I've never heard you explicitly tell a guy no. Why is that?" She blushed and looked away. "Yeah, I knew that was a rhetorical question," I muttered. Work and kids are what kept me sane during this period, although some of my coworkers remarked that I looked like I needed a good night's sleep. Or 6 nights. I was convinced I had an ulcer. I started drinking more, and yes, I started sleeping less. There were nights when I would lie in bed for hours, looking at my wife and wondering what had happened. She kept insisting that she loved me. She kept telling me that what she did was outside of us. She deserved the night she spent with Senator Dickhead, and did not regret what she had done, although she was sorry she had hurt me. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Surprisingly, one of the most helpful people to me during this time was my mother-in-law. She apologized to me repeatedly for Hester's behavior. "We're sorry, Reggie. Her father and I didn't raise her to be a selfish bitch. But I have to tell you that I really hope you can find a way to overcome this. I know you're doing this for the kids," she said one day when she called to check on me. I went into the kitchen and got another cooler of beer to take outside with me. We were having one of the summer meetings we had once a month in our neighborhood. There were 2 grills working outside, hot and cold food, fruit, desserts, and all sorts of alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. The day was perfect. Sunny, 80 degrees, and almost no wind. The meeting had already been going on for a couple hours and would probably go on for another 5 or 6. These events have always been a lot of fun for kids and adults alike. I heard women's voices coming from our home office. The study was off limits to outsiders, so I was going to move someone into the family room or living room. Although most of the activities took place outdoors, every now and then someone would come into the house for some fresh air or quiet conversation. It wasn't a problem, except for that room. Yeah, sometimes when Reggie really gets on top of me, I think of him. He's big and strong and takes what he wants. Sometimes I just can't help but go back to that night. It's a great memory that will stay with me forever. I was about to enter the room when Hester made her announcement, addressing whoever she was with. I stopped on the spot. My knees actually gave out and I almost fell over. Damn, how many people know I'm an asshole? I heard giggling. It sounded like there were 3 of them in the room. I couldn't hear what else was being said because I was too busy trying not to throw up right there. I was proud of myself for making it to the bathroom before I lost my lunch, breakfast, dinner the night before. When I finally cleaned myself up, I took the beer cooler outside, opened 2, and brought them to the 2 guys who were working the grill at that point. "Hey, Reg, are you okay? You look like you swallowed some non-alcoholic beer," John Lasky said. "I just have something on my mind, John. It's okay," I replied before walking away. For the rest of the meeting, I remained silent. When Hess and her 2 companions reappeared, I felt like I was being watched and smirked at. Maybe I was paranoid, but after a while it seemed to me that almost all the women at the barbecue were smirking at me. I waited until the end of the evening, when the kids had gone to bed and we had finished cleaning up, to express my disappointment to my wife. She was sitting in one of the chaise lounges, sucking on the wine cooler, looking quite pleased with herself. I sat down in the chaise lounge next to her. "Was there anyone in our house today who doesn't know you're a cheating whore?" I asked sincerely. She gave me a shocked look, trying to feign innocence. I grinned back. "I may have told a few girls over the past few months. After all, it was an amazing experience for me," she giggled. "He's a handsome senator. It was a great experience for me. I just wanted to brag, I guess." "First you cheat on me, then you humiliate me in front of your friends, which means that the husband of every woman you've talked to also knows that you're a slut and I'm a creep." "I'm not a whore and you're not going to keep calling me that," she shouted. "I've had one adventure. It's not like I fucked some random guy in a rundown motel." Her eyes practically glowed as she rose from the chaise lounge. "Look, this has gone on long enough and I'm tired of it," she continued, her voice growing louder. "You've been treating me like this for over a year now. Poor you. Your wife spent the night with another man, a handsome, strong man. Settle down. You're not holding me hostage anymore. If you can't figure out how to move on with your life, that's your problem. Just file for divorce. I'm tired of living like you're Mr. Perfect, and I'm waiting for forgiveness. Just file for divorce or accept what happened and we can move on." I confess that I did not expect this turn of events. I sat in shock for what seemed to me like hours, though it was probably only seconds. When I came back to reality, she was gone, and I was alone. By nature, I am a calm person, reflective and probably slow to react. I am not prone to panic and rarely lose my temper. Some people, including my wife, apparently see my restraint as a weakness. I will miss seeing my children on a daily basis. I was hoping to keep my family together, but I wasn't living in a cave, so I had an attorney who had all the information ready to go into battle for me. Monday morning, I flipped a coin first thing in the morning. Hester was delivered to her job before the end of the day. Not surprisingly, she wasn't thrilled. My phone started going off about 5 minutes after she was served, I assume. I didn't answer any of her calls. I knew I was in for a whirlwind when I got home. "You stupid idiot," yelled Hester at me as I entered the house from the garage. "Your little male ego is bruised and you're embarrassing me in front of my coworkers." "How did you embarrass me in front of our friends and neighbors the other day?" I replied. "You begged me to apply." I did. She grinned but said nothing. I put my things down and went over to the kids' house to have a quick talk with them, explaining that I still loved them and always would, even though I wouldn't be living in the same house after tomorrow. Eliza understood, as several of her high school friends had divorced parents, but Nate didn't understand the concept. I had a lot of work to do with him, but I was confident that my daughter would help with this issue. We lived in a no-fault state, so the divorce was going to be simple. She was going to get primary custody of the kids, the house, alimony, and some payments. But for some reason known only to her, she fought it stubbornly. Her attorney tried just about everything to delay the case, forced me to meet for conferences, and even offered spousal counseling. What the hell, Hess? You don't love me as much as you pretend to, or you wouldn't have done what you did. And then you brag to your friends that he was the best you've ever had. Why would I stay married to you if all this does is make things worse? I love my children to death, but if I stay with you, all they will remember about me is that I was an embittered man, I said at one meeting. But I love you, Reg. You're so hung up on one date. Yes, he was an amazing lover, but it was one time. Let it go. I can't, Hess, I replied. You cheated. You broke your vows and you don't see it as a big deal. And I see it and I always will. You promised me. I wasn't going to do it. Really, I wasn't going to, but a man can only be pushed so far. The best thing about a two-party political system is that there are two parties, whatever you want to call them. Senator Dickhead belonged to one party, which meant that the other party would be only too happy to receive information that would not reflect well on him. I prepared for this circumstance over a year ago, after my date with Hess. I asked a well-known attorney in our town to contact the chairman of a political party not affiliated with the senator. Mr. Party Chairman was very excited about the possibility of getting something that could derail the senator's next election, which would undoubtedly end any chance he had of getting into the White House. He wanted the information immediately, and even offered a handsome cash reward. But in the end, he had to settle for the promise that he would get the evidence if and only if the person in possession of it wanted it made public. My lawyer called me every month to let me know that Mr. Party Chairman had called and asked for more. This month, we were going to have a Chairman's Day. The meeting, which I was attending for the first time, was scheduled at my attorney's office. After everyone present had been introduced, I reached into my briefcase under my arm, pulled out a sealed plastic bag, and tossed it on the meeting table. The chairman's eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw what was in the bag. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Is that what I think it is?" "If you think this is the end of Senator Dickhead's career, then yes," I replied. The chairman stared at the bag as if it were filled with gold bars. He did not put out his hand to touch it, but merely stared with an expression of amazement. "How?" he whispered. "She came home, acted sassy, and went upstairs to take a shower," I explained. "She's doing laundry, so I guess she was sure I wouldn't go through the laundry basket." I waited until I heard the shower running, slipped into the bathroom, and found the panties at the bottom of the hamper. Everyone who watches TV these days knows about DNA. I'm sure when you run a test, you'll find 2 sets. By the way, here's her toothbrush for DNA comparison. I suppose you can get the senator's sample for comparison, if you don't already have one, I said, giving the chairman a hard look. Here's a censored version of the text. He blushed and looked away. That's what I thought. I knew he had already been briefed on the situation, so there was no need to go over it all again. Still, I could see the unasked why on his face. Because she's not smart enough not to mess with me. She cheated, but she thinks she's so great that I'll eventually give in and forgive her. And now she's even started wiping her feet about it. Forget her and the senator she was with, I exclaimed. Career is over, Tomas Norberto. Forget about yourself. How could your husband have gotten proof of our weekend? I knew he knew. But proof? How? Norberto yelled at Hester on the phone a week after my meeting with Mr. Chairman. I don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about, she replied, her voice shaking. I was surprised when the call showed up on the phone I used to clone her phone. Essentially, I told her that her phone had been tapped months ago, and the two of them didn't use that method of communication, if they communicated at all. What did you do, Reg? She asked when I returned her call 90 minutes later. I knew exactly what she meant, but I was in a playful mood. At least I thought I was playful. Huh? I replied. I just ordered a pepperoni pizza and garlic bread. Why the fuck should you care what I eat? Wait, how do you even know what I'm eating? She growled at me. I knew from experience that she really didn't like my stupid act. She was apparently convinced I was a weakling, but she knew I wasn't stupid. Well, I guess 1 out of 2 isn't so bad. I don't know how you did it, but it looks like you got your revenge on Senator Norberto. He threatened to slap me for what you did, but he didn't say what. Thank you for that. My parents are mad at me, your parents are mad at me. Elisa was surly with me, and you can't get it out of your head that what Tomas and I did doesn't apply to you and me. Yeah, about that, said I. 2 months after my meeting with Mr. Chairman, Senator Norberto, who was virtually certain to retain his seat, suddenly dropped out of the Senate race 8 months before the election, citing severe mental fatigue. With everything that was going on in my life, seeking female companionship was far down on my list of concerns. In fact, I hadn't even looked at a woman sexually in months when my daughter asked me about it. When are you going to start dating other women, Daddy? Chirped Eliza cheerfully on the second weekend my kids spent with me. Linda's mom really wants to date you. I know my jaw dropped. I guess I was so caught up in the divorce that I didn't think too much about my future, aside from taking care of the kids every weekend and 2 fucking weeks in the summer. Linda's mom told you that? Would you mind, honey? I asked, feeling somewhat shocked. Well, she didn't tell me, Daddy, but she told Annie's mom and I overheard, Eliza said. I don't mind, Daddy. I don't want you to be alone. But please, Daddy, don't go on dates with Marcy's mom. None of us kids like her. Kids understand, Daddy. Linda's mom had been divorced from her scumbag husband for about 5 years. She was an adorable blonde with a slim shape and a simpering personality like a former cheerleader. I had no idea she was interested in me. You know, when you're married, you don't evaluate your prospects with other women. At least I didn't. Was I stupid? I didn't realize Eliza was watching me closely. It's okay, Dad. I'm almost 9. I know all about things like divorce. We'll be fine, me and Nate. You'll take care of yourself. That's how I ended up in the dating game, apparently. Linda's mom, Julie, was my first and we had a nice date. I felt I should tell her that I was just getting back into the dating scene and wasn't ready for anything serious yet. She smiled at me like a 5-year-old and told me that she understood me and that I didn't need to explain myself to everyone I would date. She gave me a lot of really good information, like it was a Divorced Parenting 101 course. She also told me not to be surprised if most of the divorced mothers of my kids' friends start looking for me. I had earned a reputation as a good guy, a good father. I had a good job, and I wasn't bad looking. At those words, she blushed. From time to time, I would meet up with Julie and a few other divorced moms. I rarely had time to think about Hester and our previous marriage. When I did have time, I had to admit that I was lonely, but not lonely enough to give her a second chance. I wasn't going to waste time wondering if and when she would cheat on me again. For her part, Hess wasn't shy about reminding me that her affair was just a stupid mistake, and that she would never do anything like that again. Stupid mistake? I grinned. Poor judgment, lack of respect, ultimately just selfish thinking. You chose sex with a senator over love for your family. Her mouth opened and closed, twice. I know she wanted to respond, but she couldn't say anything that would argue in her favor. I still expected her to keep trying, especially since the senator didn't seem to be an option anymore. He told her never to contact him again. My ex-mother-in-law told me Saturday when the kids and I came over for dinner. He thinks you had something to do with him dropping out of the senatorial race, and he seems to think she didn't do enough to stop you. I raised my eyebrows and continued chewing my food. I didn't comment. A few guys from work wanted to try this fairly new upscale bar with a dance floor one Thursday night a couple months later. When I was married, I stayed away from such outings like the plague, but being single, I started going there regularly. There were 4 of us. We took a table and ordered drinks, each of us scanning the surrounding tables and the dance floor to check how warm the place was. I noticed 2 women as soon as they entered. The first looked to be in her late 40s, but she was dressed probably in her 30s and trying to look younger. Her silk blue blouse was unbuttoned halfway down, exposing a pair of milky white breasts, and her mid-thigh length skirt showed that she had a pair of long athletic legs. She had short dark brown hair and green eyes. Her friend looked completely out of place in this bar. She looked a little older than her friend, maybe in her 50s, but she was dressed like she had money. Her sweater and skirt were clearly from an expensive store, and she looked stylish and beautiful. She had shoulder-length silver blonde hair and dark eyes. The women sat down at a table some distance away from us, and they were immediately besieged by guys asking if they wanted to keep them company or dance. I had to admit that I wouldn't mind dancing with any of them. The dark-haired one in particular looked like she was up for some fun, and maybe she was more than that. The dark-haired woman had no problem going out on the dance floor with every man she met and was not shy about shaking her dignity. The blonde woman had danced only a few times and seemed much more reserved. An hour later, I decided to ask the blonde woman to dance, but as soon as I approached the table, the dark-haired woman reached out, grabbed my hand, and pulled me onto the dance floor. She rubbed herself against me, and as I watched her breasts bounce and rub against me, I completely forgot about her friend. We danced 2 fast songs together, then the music changed to slow, and she pressed herself against me with her whole body. I was hard as a brick in my pants, and when she reached up and pressed her lips to mine, I was speechless. We left the club together and drove to my apartment. Between our first and second meeting of the night, she told me about her life. She and her friend were here to celebrate the official divorce that had taken place the day before. Rosie turned out to be a great partner, and we dated for about a month before she told me she didn't want to commit to marriage so soon after her divorce. I understood, and we went our separate ways. I never got around to asking her about the friend she was with that first night. I feel like I missed something with this woman. A few weeks later, I was sitting behind the bar at another high-end establishment, but this time I was alone. I had just stopped in for a couple drinks at the end of a long week to relax by myself. It wasn't my weekend with the kids, so I was going to be alone. She entered alone and heads turned. She had a stunning figure and a high mop of loose auburn curls that fell to her shoulders. She stepped confidently in 4-inch stilettos that seductively encased her braless figure as she settled into the chair next to mine. I was sure I'd just stepped into heaven. My brain was working overtime trying to come up with a killer opening sentence when she looked me straight in the face and asked me what I was drinking. Angel Envy Rye, I replied, smiling. My brain quickly turned to mush when I heard her smoky alto tone. Oh, nice, a man of taste, she cooed. She ordered what I was drinking and did it as neatly as I did, and spent most of the evening telling me about a marketing company she founded a few years ago. Wow, she was beautiful, smart, and owned a successful business. After a couple hours, we left together and went to her apartment, which was really great. She mentioned that she preferred to have sex in her own bed, as most women do, and then proceeded to tell me about psychology. When she undressed, it was clear that she was no stranger to the gym. I highly doubted she was 45 years old, as she claimed, because her body was incredibly trim. That said, she was flexible, and by the time we finished 2 sessions, I had to admit that I had a few sore muscles. The first time we had an energetic session in one pose, and the second time we shared a passionate experience in 2 different positions. She was an amazing kisser, and I felt a connection with her that had been missing since my date with Hester. In one night, I got more candor from Marielle Washington than I had from Hester after 9 years of marriage. Marielle told me that she was mostly married to her business and never wanted children, but she had a few men with whom she maintained a friends with benefits relationship. I really think I could have fallen in love with this woman, but since that option was not considered, I accepted her offer to be a friend with benefits. We dated about once a month for the next year or so, until she surprised even herself by falling in love with a man much younger than herself. Lucky bastard. It was not unusual for my ex-mother-in-law to call me occasionally. After the divorce, my mother-in-law and I remained close. They understood why I had to divorce their daughter, and it was about the grandchildren. Hell, I still call them mom and dad. Can I ask a favor, Reg? She asked uncertainly. Always, as long as it doesn't involve your daughter, I replied. The favor was to accompany my mother-in-law's personal administrator to their company's upcoming Christmas party. Really? She's a good girl, Reg. She divorced an abusive womanizer a couple years ago, and I don't think she's been dating since. She's hurt, Reg, and she needs a good man to show her that not all men are scum. I know you're that kind of man, said my mother-in-law. How weird is it when your ex-mother-in-law tries to set you up on a date? Just tell me one thing, Mom, I begged. Tell me she doesn't have a wonderful character. Mom got the joke and giggled. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, Reggie. You might even let us keep the kids for a night or two, she said. Mom was right. I was pleasantly surprised. Sherilyn Cerrito was 5 feet tall, but she was no stranger to adorableness, and her breasts and ass were a nice size. She was outgoing but not simpering, and she had a cute way of wrinkling her nose and squinting her green eyes when she was happy. Just as importantly, she actually had good character. I made sure to stay with Sherilyn all night and was fully attentive to her as I would have done with my ex-wife. Sherry seemed to be delighted with this attention. She was a great conversationalist, although she had a tendency to defer to others. I suppose that was to be expected given her background. We sat at the table with my relatives. My mom was as gracious as ever, but my dad started the evening a little distant. I understood that, but as the evening went on, he gradually warmed up. I think I surprised Sherry with my dancing skills. Hester had always loved to dance, and I had learned to make her happy. Sherry had a knack for fast dancing too, and in the slow ones, she snuggled up to me like we'd been a couple for years. I definitely loved the feel of her body pressed against mine. I received a tender kiss on the lips and her phone number as I walked Sherry to the door at the end of the evening. I would definitely owe it to my in-laws to spend extra time with my grandchildren. I waited 3 days before I called Sherry and asked for a date. She agreed to the following Friday night at one of the best Italian restaurants in town, followed by an evening art show at a local gallery. Sherry dressed sexier for the date than she did for the Christmas party, and I was even more impressed. We had a great time again. We went out 3 more times before I decided it was time for me to meet her 8-year-old daughter and for her to meet my date. We spent a few hours playing miniature golf and then had a picnic at a local park. In my opinion, it went well. The two girls in particular bonded very well, although my son wasn't as excited as I expected. After all, he was at the age where all the girls have kitties. Sherry and I saw each other several times a week. When I had two, we had family parties that included all five of us. Everything was fine until a few weeks into the new school year when I got a call from Hester. "I don't know what your faggot friend has been teaching my kids, but your son was in the principal's office today for fighting and his face looks like he lost. He got 3 days detention and all he tells me is that it all started with this Monique he keeps calling his sister," she yelled into my phone. "First of all, you of all people have no right to call my girlfriend a slut, you slut. As for Nate, I'll come over after dinner and take him out for ice cream. How about we don't panic until we know what happened?" I heard her hum before she passed out. I picked up Nate after dinner and we headed to a small ice cream store. When he got into my car, I visually examined him. He had a split lip and a scratch on the left side of his face. "You should see the other guy, Dad," he joked. "How about the truth, Nathan Abraham?" said I. He wrinkled his nose when I used his first and middle names in full. "Some boy was picking on Mo, Dad. I told him not to hit on my sister. He took a swing at me first, and then I gave him a good punch. I was told I broke his nose. It cracked badly, and blood came from everywhere when I hit him." You could see that he was trying not to smirk. The boy who'd been picking on Mo was 2 years older than Nate. "When I talk to Mo, will she tell me the same story?" I asked. "Absolutely, Dad. I wouldn't have hit the guy, but he swung first. I was just protecting Mo. You're always telling me I have to look out for Eliza, so I figured the same goes for Mo. She's awfully small, Dad," Nate said. "Yes, Nate. And you did the right thing," I said, trying but not succeeding to contain the pride in my voice. Monique did resemble her mother in her diminutiveness. She was at least half a head shorter than almost everyone in her class. Besides, he'd always told Nate that it was his responsibility to take care of his sister. I guess now he considered Monique a member of the family. It was interesting. Sometimes the innocence of youth is smarter than the wisdom of age. "I'm proud of you for standing up for Mo, but you mustn't tell anyone at school that I said that," I said. "I'll talk to the principal and see what I can do. You might want to explain about Mo to your mother. Apparently, you and Elise don't know much about my life, which I'm grateful for, by the way. But it would be better if it came from you and Elise," I said. "My 7-year-old has it all figured out. Kids grow up so fast these days. By the way, Dad, when are you and Cherie going to get married? You know she's great, don't you?" Like I said, they grow up fast. He was right, too. I should have put a ring on that woman's finger. The next day, I called the principal. The school had a zero-tolerance policy for fighting, even if the student was defending himself. However, the school also had a zero-tolerance policy for bullying, so after interviewing witnesses, the bully received a total of 6 days of detention. I didn't agree with this policy, but told Nate to accept his conclusion like a man. I also told him that he was right, and I would ask Cherie to marry me as soon as I could, that is, as soon as I could buy a ring. I think it all went downhill when Hester found out that Sherry was Mom's assistant and that Mom had arranged the first date. "What the hell, Mom? You were supposed to be on my side," Hess yelled at her when she found out, Mom recounted later. "There is no your side," Mom replied. "He'll never come back to you. You've ruined everything. So why waste a good man? Sherilyn is a good woman and a great friend. She deserves a good man like Reggie." The scream that Hess let out was horrible, my mom said in telling the story. Although both of my children liked Sherry, my daughter especially liked the way she took care of me. Cherie by nature tried to please me in almost everything, making me feel like I was truly the king of my castle. Naturally, this encouraged me to treat her like a queen. Eliza seemed to really enjoy the fact that Cherie and I were almost trying to outdo each other in love. "I'm not sure if you guys are charming or disgusting," Elise once told me, "but I really enjoy being around you and trying to figure it out." Our 3 children, my parents, and former in-laws were the only guests at our small wedding a couple months later. The clerk of court officiating the ceremony was more than surprised that my ex-mother-in-law sided with Sherry as maid of honor. "It's a very long story," I grinned when she inquired. "Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition," is a phrase from the old British comedy troupe Monty Python's Flying Circus. Truth be told, no one expects an inquisition from a federal marshal either. I was caught off guard when 2 such officers entered my office Monday morning. Apparently, the feds weren't too happy about a certain former senator getting his ass kicked and his balls crushed in the restroom of some fancy restaurant in Houston, Texas. My name and the names of several other cuckolded husbands were on the list of possible suspects. I explained to them that my alibi was that I was at home with my wife and 3 children several hundred miles away from the crime scene. But I can't say I'm sorry to hear of the senator's troubles. No one, and I say this sincerely, deserves it more, I said to the very disgruntled marshals. You do realize that stupid asshole fucked my then wife almost 4 years ago. If I was going to do something, don't you think I would have done it long before then? I asked in my most sarcastic tone. Getting a 3rd degree from the feds, however, was just the beginning. A week later, an Associated Press reporter showed up at my office demanding that I repeat the whole dating story. It seems he had somehow gotten his hands on a confidential list of 26 women the senator had apparently dated during his 8 years in office. By this point, several people knew about Hester's date with the senator, although I certainly never advertised it. Hester had probably told more people over the years than I had, as she was certainly proud of her accomplishment. However, I had to wonder how proud she was when the story of the senator's assault came out and she was named as one of his mistresses. Why did you tell me about this guy? She practically screamed when I picked up the phone. I didn't know. He told me you were on the senator's list. All I did was confirm the veracity of your name on the list. I wasn't going to lie to save your ass from embarrassment, whore. I'm not a whore, she shouted at me before I disconnected the call. I have to admit, I chuckled. I must also confess that at the time the article hit the papers, I was thinking of taking an extended vacation out of town. She had screwed up literally, but I was going to pay a shameful price too. Sherry talked me down off that ledge, so to speak. Don't try to fight anyone. Walk in the truth. She cheated. You divorced her. Walk away, Cherie said. Unfortunately, my children were going to be the victim of verbal bullying for the rest of their high school careers. We will be discussing the fact that their mother was a selfish liar for years to come. I also felt very sorry for my former in-laws, who by then had become our close friends. We invited them to stay with us in the house we bought for a couple weeks after the article hit the papers. They mostly stayed in the house and didn't answer the phone. I love her. You know how it is when you have kids. But I'm so ashamed that my little girl decided it was perfectly acceptable to play slut for a day, Daddy said. No one wants their little girl to become that kind of woman. Eventually, the notoriety subsided and life returned to normal. Gradually, my kids started spending more time with Sherry, Mo, and me at our house. There was nothing official about it, but it was getting to the point where our house would become a gathering place for the neighborhood kids. Hess resented me at first, but I think my mom toned it down a bit. I also made sure that Eliza and Nate kept communication with Hess open so she wouldn't bitch that I was stealing her kids. Again, I think the fact that Mom and Dad came over often made it easier. The kids and I hardly ever talked about Hester when they were with me. She will always be their mother, but she was a former one in my life and they also didn't want to upset Sherry, who they quickly started calling Mom like Mo did. I know Hess's in-laws were a little embarrassed when they first started calling Sherry Mom, but since they had been close to Sherry before we were married, the embarrassment soon stopped. With all that was going on in my life and the lives of my family members, I didn't pay much attention to what was going on in Hess's life. I knew she was seeing her children periodically, but was surprised when Eliza informed me one afternoon that her mother was engaged to be married. A wave of sadness swept over me, for what might have been. Then I felt a soothing arm around my chest, and my sadness was quickly replaced by elation at what I now had.